2025, it's a new year. How about we start a new garden? Are you somebody that wants to grow your own fruits and vegetables but don't really know where to start? Well, this video is probably going to help you out. This is a beginner guide. This is a bunch of tips and tricks. We're even going to go into building a garden bed, how we fill it and what we do with it. So there should be everything in this video you need to successfully start your own fruit or veggie garden at the end of it. So you jumped online, you're all motivated, you started seeing immaculately curated gardens that they assured you were really easy to take care of, and now you're feeling a bit overwhelmed on where to start. Well, the good news is gardening doesn't have to be complicated. It can be very simple, and it can be as hard or as easy as you want to make it. It can take as much or as little time as you have. We're going to cover a few things in this video: where to get started, what are some of the best tools I'd recommend for a beginner. But ultimately, you need to start figuring it out, what you want to grow, where it's going to grow, what you're going to grow it in, and what you need to kickstart that journey. Now, the good news is you don't need designer garden beds or designer tools to start growing your own veggies at home. It can be something as simple as a homemade rock garden bed that's completely overgrown with weeds at the moment, but you get the point. Or it can be some recycled wood that was lying around the place. Ultimately, it's whatever you have. I've built corrugated iron garden beds that have worked well for us, and I've also brought commercial ones that haven't worked. Gardening doesn't have to be complicated, doesn't have to be expensive, but it is very rewarding. So I'd suggest that just work with whatever you got. The next thing I'm going to be building is a bit of a brick garden bed from some recycled bricks from a place in town. You can even use wooden sleepers. We've cut down a couple of posts, and I'll show you over here. Now, I wouldn't have placed this garden bed here retrospectively, but still, look, simple as that. A couple of bits of wood that I cut down and cut to size to form a garden bed. Doesn't have to be complicated. Don't get overwhelmed by, having to spend hundreds of dollars on things you see online, otherwise your garden won't grow. It's just not the case. As a species, we've been doing this for thousands of years. It's okay to start small and your garden to grow with you as you grow. Now, here's an example of a corrugated iron bed. These are our first type of garden beds that we put together. They probably cost about, look, $5, $6 in screws. I was able to find the corrugated iron for free, and the wood offcuts were just lying around the place. Now, you don't have to build them as tall as this. If I was doing it again, I wouldn't, just because of how much fill it takes to fill them, even though we did put stumps and logs and stuff down the bottom. But if you were making these and you had a bit of an angle grinder and a drill, you just cut them in half. Alternatively, if you're trying to keep it super simple and you don't have the tools, do what I did and just start screwing them together in the shape of a garden bed, and ultimately you'll get somewhere to grow. So if this is your first time delving into gardening, some of the things you need to consider are, where are you going to place your growing beds or whatever you're growing in? It can be a bucket, it can be a pot plant, it could be a garden bed, it could be directly into ground, whatever it is you've decided. But there are a couple of things you need to make sure that you're aware of. So a lot of plants like a healthy amount of sun. So if your garden's very shaded, you're going to have to grow things that can handle that. Alternatively, if you're in a very arid environment, too much sun will also kill the plant. And don't get too overwhelmed, things are pretty hardy. There are definitely some beginner-friendly things I'd suggest you start growing. Things like tomatoes or potatoes, very beginner-friendly, very good to get your confidence up after you've grown a couple of different types of crops, and you can venture into whatever. Alternatively, if you're going big end and you're just doing a big garden all in one, you're going to plant a variety of things. Gardening is as much about learning by doing as it is by learning from failure. So don't worry too much. Just kind of start doing some research online. Doing your research online is extremely important to understand what grows well in your climate, what you should be planting for the time of year, all those sorts of things. But don't get too overwhelmed or go down too deep a rabbit hole thinking that everything has to be perfect and you need to buy X, Y, and Z, okay? It's just, you don't need to do that. Let's just start small, we'll grow together, we'll start a little garden bed. So as far as the 5 things that I would do, obviously research your area you're going to grow, like we talked about, having that enough sunlight come down. Research what you're going to grow in, what's available to you. Are you getting the garden bed, the bucket, the pot, whatever it is? And then figure out why you want to start a garden. So do you want to start it for, you think it's aesthetically pleasing to have a garden when you look out into the backyard? It's a good enough reason. Are you more concerned about the health benefits and knowing where your food comes from? It's a big thing these days to understand what's in your food and growing healthy vegetables and fruits for your family. Are you trying to save money? If you're trying to save money, obviously you need to start small and start with what you've got. Okay, you're not going to save money if you go out and spend $400 on the garden bed that you grow $4 worth of carrots in. It's just not, you know, economically feasible. So work with what you've got, figure out why you want to do it. The next couple of things we're going to talk about are the tools and the soil. You don't need heaps of tools as a beginner, okay? You need somewhere to put it, count that as one tool. You can sow by hand, so you don't really need any of the tools or anything like that. Even if you're growing directly into ground, you know, you can mow out an area, you can scrape it up with maybe a spade or a shovel, so if you have one of them, and you can plant directly into ground. If you're planting into a garden bed, just do it with your hands. It's fine. I've done that way for years, never had any issues. Probably the most important thing to understand is what kind of soil you're going to need. So you can go to like a hardware shop, or if you have a wholesale soil manufacturer in town, a lot of towns will have places that sell sands and gravels and garden soils and compost at a much cheaper rate than, say, a commercial style hardware shop that sells the bags for kind of $20, $30 for the premium stuff. It's essentially the same stuff. It's just maybe it's run through an additional filter before it goes into the bag. So if you're buying a large quantity of soil, let's just say half a cubic metre would be a good amount to fill a garden bed. Where we are in northern New South Wales, we can get that for about $28, and that's about 300, 400 kilos of soil. So it's quite a lot. If you have access to a trailer, you go pick it up yourself, no dramas. If you need it to get it delivered, obviously it comes at a bit of an additional fee, but I thought it might be good to demonstrate from kind of start to finish how we could actually do this. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure out and screw together a garden bed using stuff I find. Okay, we might go pick up a pallet and we'll do it that way. That way, you know, pallets are pretty available for everyone. So no matter what your circumstance, you could start a garden. We'll measure it, we'll cut it, we'll screw it together, we'll fill it with some soil from around the place. And then we'll sow some seeds, and that way we can do it together. You can kind of build a garden bed along with me, okay? All right, cool. Have a looky-loo at what we found. Look at this. An old, discarded kind of gate or something. You can see where the latch was over here. See, this is what I mean. You can really find and use really anything. So you could use a pallet, you could use whatever you got, it doesn't matter. Let's just start. So we're going to even try and reuse some of these screws. Some of them aren't going to be any good. Now, this is a pretty okay size, so we don't have to cut it to size. Obviously, if you found something that was too long or different sizes, you're going to have to cut it to size. Little extra work, it's not too big. All right, I'm going to unscrew this guy, and then before we reassemble it, we'll come back. Alright, so we've taken it apart. Here's what we've got. We've got our screws, which we'll reuse, planks of wood, which will form the sides, and we might use this stuff, I don't know, for something else, or we might use that little bit as a bit of a brace in the corners. Let's start putting the garden bed together. Alright, decided I'm going to use this to brace the corners, so we're just going to cut 4 little chunks. You don't need to see that, so I'll go do that and I'll come back. Right, here's the aftermath. 4 little corner bits. You'll see what I mean about these when we start putting this together. Alright, there we go. We've screwed it all together. So here's our first little planter box. That took all of about 8.5 minutes. All right, here's the box we just put together. So we've chosen our spot outside, gets a lot of sun. You can see a couple of similar sized boxes that we've already got here that I've got a few perennials in that I'll go into in a second, so you can see just what you can grow in them. Now, I would suggest putting some cardboard at the bottom underneath here, and that'll just stop this kind of grass and weeds and stuff growing up through your bed. It'll definitely delay it by several months at least anyway, and the cardboard will break down and feed nitrogen back into the soil. So all you need to do, fill this up with soil, decide what you're putting in here, something that grows above the ground like a leafy green, or I don't know what, tomatoes would be fine in this. You probably don't want to plant anything that kind of grows below the ground in something this size, so maybe leave the potatoes or the carrots for a deeper box, but yeah, anything will kind of grow in here. I'll show you these other ones. Here's some very similar planter boxes that I've used for a while, and we've got some asparagus, rosemary that's looking very happy, thyme, and rhubarb. I like using these kind of boxes to put some perennials in. They're just a plant once and forget and reap and harvest for years to come. You can see how useful these type of boxes are. All right, so we've gone over what you're going to grow, where you're going to grow it. We've even made something for you to grow it in. There's no excuses this year why you haven't started your garden. 2025 is the year that you're going to start your veggie garden. Now, the last thing I'd probably want to cover in this video is, once you've planted your seeds, you need to make sure that you water it in, okay? And the quality of your water is very important. If you're on a town grid style water system, just be aware that that water might not be as good as, say, direct rainwater. So if you can catch rainwater or use rainwater on your plants, they'll thank you for it. Use what you've got. Tap water's fine, don't get me wrong, but if you have access to rainwater, just typically find that plants react a bit better with that. Make sure that if you're sowing seeds directly into that garden bed, you keep it damp for the first few days, and when you start to see the seeds sprout, just water it somewhat regularly. You don't want that soil to dry out too much, okay? So we're going to go over a bunch of different things on this channel, how to propagate, how to grow pretty much every type of vegetable. You can follow me throughout the year as I plant different gardens in the different seasons here. If you found this useful, if you like this kind of content, or if you're just here to enjoy your time, please do consider subscribing. This is a brand new channel. I look forward to growing it along with you guys, and hopefully you take something away and learn something about gardening. So thanks for joining me.